Start. Hello and welcome to the first of the TBR Roundtable Talks. This is the inaugural session, and I'm really thrilled to have you all over here today. And looking forward to an illuminating discussion with all of you, all these aspects of publishing and bookselling that we talk about within the indie space, and perhaps some possible, probable directions for the near future. So this is how it will go. I'll introduce each one of you, start with the first couple of questions and hope that, my role will be reduced to being that of a moderator and all of you will take the discussion ahead. Of course, you have the questions I shared with all of you, right? So let's start with Radhika. Radhika Timbadia is the proprietrix of Champaca Bookstore in Bangalore. She spends much of her time figuring out how to run an independent bookstore while also reading and spending time with her dog, cat, and plants. Welcome, Radhika.
Thank you.
Shobhna S Kumar is the first in her family to call India home in over a century. She fell in love with a woman from Mumbai and moved countries to be with her. On her arrival in 2002, Shobhna went back into the closet and lived her life alienated and isolated until she and her partner found safe spaces to be themselves. This journey was instrumental in establishing Queer Inc. as the first queer-owned publishing house in India. With experience in publishing and producing events, films, and theater, Shobhna is now developing resources to support the next generation of LHBTHQIA Indians. Welcome, Shobhna.
Thank you.
Poet, writer, and translator Dibyajyoti Sharma, who calls himself, quote unquote, an accidental publisher, runs the independent poetry publishing outfit Red River from his bedroom in Delhi. Established in 2017, Red River has so far published 70+ titles to varying degrees of success. Red River believes that art cannot be commodified. We survive by being rare, being unique. Welcome, Dibyajyoti. Esha Chatterjee runs the publishing house B Books and loves the art of making beautiful books. B Books publishes everything from translations, fiction, non-fiction, essays, to graphic novels and corporate coffee table books. She's also the managing director for Patra Bharati, the third largest Bengali publishing house, and heads its marketing wing. Patra Bharati and B Books boast of a catalog of 2,500+ titles with award-winning books, books by upcoming authors, and books that have been made into successful movies and international bestsellers. B Books has also produced and structured international capacity building programs with art councils across the world. Esha actively participates in structuring the events and looks after national and international collaborations, participates in various book fairs. Apart from that, she is a book reviewer, critic, and moderator and Instagram. Welcome, Esha. Vishal Pipraya grew up in the 80s, hustling to rent comic books in his society for 1 rupee a day. Having learned some sense in his 20s, he could quit his full-time job as an IT manager to backpack throughout the country and indulge in his love of street food and historic ruins. Eventually, having run out of money, in his 30s, he wisened up and started Pagdandi Book Cafe with his wife, Neha. Still broke, and now having figured out life, he's waiting to see what 40s has in store for him. So welcome all of you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we start? Okay. So we've all been talking about the future of publishing, independent publishing, with the West bringing in awards for their small publishers. I think it's become a current topic now. But we at TBR have been, thinking of this for a very long time, not just now when, small publishers and small bookstores are gaining more and more prominence. So we do believe that independent publishing and independent bookstores play a very prominent role in both curating and helping non-mainstream literature to survive. Now, in that context, I would like to open up the discussion today with asking you, each one of you, what made you turn to the business of publishing books or of selling them? And by that, I refer mainly to the vision you had or you have for your publishing house or your bookstore. So what has the history been like? How did it work initially and how is it now? What is this journey like? And it's open. Esha, would you like to begin?
Yes, I think I can. My internet is a bit dodgy, so I think just a few nods would help me to understand that I'm audible.
Yeah. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
I can. So for me, I think it was an obvious choice. I was in corporate for a very short stint, almost a year and a half. And then because my family is into publishing, but Bangla, there was a choice that either I join my Bengali publishing press or I start something new. And while growing up, I was reading a lot of translations. So the initial thought was that I'd only focus on publishing translations, primarily from Bangla because I can read Bangla, and then maybe from Assamese, Nepali, and Hindi, which are the other languages I understand. So that was the obvious choice. But once I started, I realized that there's a lot of potential in terms of there are new writers who are writing very well. There's a lot of market for graphic novels. I'm not talking about the commercials. I'm just saying that, there's, in terms of stories, there's a lot of stories that are being told and being written. And there's the scope of publishing them is not as much, especially in the fiction space, I think. And the English space is kind of ruled by just a few big, I would say, international publishing houses who are big publishing houses themselves, as well as distributors of other big publishing presses across the world. So I had very few independent publishers to look up to. I can mention two. One was Zuban at that point of time, and Seagull, which turns 40 years today. And it started from Calcutta as well. So yes, that's what, that was the vision. And we had a setup, publishing setup. At the end of the day, it's a business. So we had a setup, not in terms of editorial, but accounts, finance, that part. And a little bit of experience as well, which I got from my dad, and some avenues of selling books as well. So for me, that was, like I started, that was the obvious choice. That's why I came into publishing.
And when you started, what was the scene outside India like? Were there any names?
For me, I did not have an exposure of international, for that matter, not even national publishing, because we were just into Bangla publishing, and my father and the Patra Bharati publishing press is very popular in the eastern part of Bengal, and the ones who read Bengali. He would go to Delhi for the Delhi Book Fair, but it was not like I would go along with him and meet a lot of colleagues in the English space. So it was more like cold emails and just calls and messages, getting contacts from one contact to the other. A lot of Hindi publishers in Delhi actually helped me get in touch with them. So my knowledge of international publishing came in much later. I started in 2014, and it came in, I would say, around 2016 end, when I went for my first international fellowship program. That's how it started. And then I've been going to fellowship programs every year, some or the other one, just to kind of build my network in the international publishing space, independent mostly.
Okay. Shobhna, I read on your site, what you want to do with queering, and I'll quote from the site. You say, we believe that now is the time to invite people from the mainstream into our lives. It is time to impact the change we want ourselves. time for queer Indian literature to be acknowledged and celebrated as an increasingly important genre. Now, given this vision that you began with, has it happened the way you would have wished for it, or what has your been like?
So I started off with the querying basically because of the dearth of information available. And not only information, but people were invisible as well. And then we know that, books are very respectable in India. So I used to go to retail bookstores and not get any books. I used to belong to several memberships. For example, I think a prominent retail bookshop had a membership program. And I sort of rang up and said, can you locate this book for me? No, just because of the content, because it was published in India. So one was that there was hardly any books around. The second thing was that the bookshops were not bringing in those books, not stocking it on shelves or anything. So that led me to actually, the first time we launched Queer Inc., it was about collating all information on queer books published in India. And that's when we realized that there were less than 200 books published in 2010. By the time we did a lot of research in 2009, and around that time, there were less than 2,000 books with Indian ISBNs. Now it's a different matter, but then we started getting books, importing books on LGBT. The issue was there, the customs law did not allow any books in the country that hurt the sentiments of Indians. Now, that's a blanket statement. So I've got a lot of books stuck up in warehouses, I don't know where. And then, after that, friends started bringing in books. So that's how we sort of started with the books. And then I had, I think in 2010, I had several firsts in terms of events, like the first queer book fair, the first queer open mic, first queer book club, author meets and things like that. And that's when, people
and
started. Yes,
and
that was in.
Yes,
that was in
2012. Yes.
Yeah, the infamous and out. So it's in 2010 when I started it, so people started coming back to me and saying, look, we want to read Indian characters, Indian locations. And that's when the idea for Out came out. It's like, and also I'm not a publisher by training or trade or anything. I studied and I worked mostly as a social worker. And when I came in India, I actually felt the impact of being of a straight acting, for that matter, in 2002. And I realized what other people could be going through. And that empowered me, I guess, to do this. And then in 2002 is when we first published our book Out, which was a huge, it was welcomed very much. And since then, I've been learning the craft of publishing. And I'm still at 52 or 54, I think. Still learning, but getting there. I think we've had several publications under our belt, and I think the lockdown March 2019 was not a good year for readers or publishers, small publishers like us, because what happened was it stopped the sales of the books. It just hardly any books were sold, and as it is, Amazon was closed, small retailers were closed. So then we had to rethink how we approach people. So we're going through a phase of realigning our business to the expectations of the consumer at the moment. So that I'll talk about later. But I think the readership is there. The need for knowledge is there. It's just that there's not enough queer books with queer Indian content at the moment. And at the moment, we've got slightly less than 300 books, I think. So we've grown by 100 in the last 10 years. Compare that to, 1.3 billion people. Yes.
This is something like, along the lines of what Onej said in one of his interviews after his book was published, that people celebrate queer movies, but nobody wants to show it for all it's worth.
Yeah.
A very mindful.
Yeah. I've got many stories of distributors, retailers, of why they would not want to stock. A lot of stories.
We would like
getting there.
We would like to listen to this today.
shall we do the introductions for everybody else before I get into the depth of what I do, why I do it?
Yeah, we're looking at the vision right now. Divya saw himself as a noble failure when he started. How has it been, Divya, with you?
Surprisingly good. I mean, I've got a branding now, which is, I'm seriously surprised. Like now Red River is a brand, apparently. People know Red River. They don't probably they have not read the books, they have not purchased it, but they know the brand, Red River, which is, I'm happy about it and I'm really surprised about it. And it worries me a bit now, because what next? I'm not sure, and then my friends are telling me, okay, now we got to go big, you need to reach out to more people, go to all the bookstores and publish more famous writers and go beyond poetry, work on novels and other things. I said, I'm the only person who is doing this and I kind of like it this way. And there's no money. Money is the main thing. Where is the money coming from? So, I mean, then they say, okay, why don't you what is it, get an investor and do something about it. But then this is an added pressure. I don't want it, because what I'm doing is the whole idea, the goal was when I started doing it was because I like doing it. I enjoy the process of creating a book. Selling was never never in the agenda. For a long time, I was selling the books myself, on Amazon, which Radhika and Vishal don't like, but Amazon helped me grow despite everything else. Because at the time in the beginning, I approached some bookstores and they don't care about poetry books. And I don't blame them, because poetry as such don't sell. Poetry is purchased by people who knows the poet. But now after publishing more than 70 titles, I think there are people are starting to trust Red River as a brand, and there are people who are picking up books even if they don't know the poet themselves, which is a good sign. One thing, I don't know what I'm going to do next. It's in a very odd situation I'm in right now.
But your vision for the art that you wanted to create, aren't you satisfied with that? I'm satisfied with that.
I'm fully satisfied with that, because I have been able to do some books that I really wanted to do. Mainly, we did a massive anthology called Witness, the Red River Book of Poetry of Dissent, which I don't think a big press would be able to do that. I mean, would do that. Something that we worked for 3 years, me and the editor Navina Das, and we did it the way we wanted it.
Right.
And then we have done several other anthologies also. So, and then the main point which I'm think the USP of Red River, and which I don't want to lose, is that when we work with a book, with a manuscript, we work with the author. So it's not it's not a one-on-one transaction, author, publisher, you publish the book and then you go ahead, do other things. So it's we develop a bond, all of, I should say 90% of Red River authors are now friends. They're part of the Red River family. So I want to maintain that. And this takes time. One book takes more or less a year to from the process of accepting the manuscript to getting the book out.
So, yeah, so we'll come back to this about, curating books and what books you want to publish and whether you're able to do what you want to do. But just for the time being, I also want to know from both Vishal and Radhika about your vision when you started your bookstore. You're in a very unique space. How do you see yourself, in the community of readers, your space vis-a-vis this community of readers? So, Vishal, you talk of enabling authentic human experiences, and Radhika, I know that your bookstore, engages with a lot of activities, curated events. You focus on a particular publisher in a particular month. I think you were doing with Tara Books last month in May. So, how has it been for the two of you? Have you all been able to do what you all set out to do? And Vishal? You're on mute, Vishal.
Yeah. So I think for us, it's been kind of a journey because we did not set out to become a bookstore first. When we started out, we were a lending library. So, however, we used to have a section of books for sale, but our main focus was on the lending library and renting out the books. However, the pandemic changed that because when the library shut down, then what we figured out was that there was, some demand from readers for books for sale, especially when even the online marketplaces were not delivering books. We were able to do that in the city. And since we already had our tie-ups with the distributors, it kind of became a natural extension to morph into a bookstore from a library. And I think for us, as people who are part of the trade, for us, it's always been about, handing over a book to a customer and when asked for a recommendation. So that thing has not changed, be it a library or a bookstore. That when somebody comes and asks for a recommendation and we are able to give them something that they might like. And if they come back and tell us that they love the recommendation, that's cherry on top. So I think that's something we experience on a day-to-day basis. And that those daily, wins is what gives us the satisfaction of continuing to do what we are. I don't know if I answered your question and I
Yes.
got derailed, but yeah.
All right. Radhika?
I think it's been quite an interesting journey for us. We started Champaca in 2019. So we were only open for some 10 months before the pandemic hit us. So we were still finding our feet. Yes, we are still finding our feet actually, and figuring out what it is and how best to do that. We from the beginning, we wanted to focus a lot on diverse books and diverse authors, and we've done that as much as we can from the beginning. But I think what we realized very quickly is that it's not enough to stock these books and authors. We have to constantly talk about them. We have to hand sell them. Like Vishal was saying, you have to recommend them to people and give it to them, when people are asking for recommendations. So we're finding innovative ways of doing that through the pandemic to help our survival. So we started a subscription program, we started a website, we did a whole bunch of things that we didn't plan on doing at least this quickly. We were quite focused on our physical space for the first 10 months. But we did a whole bunch of new things. And now we're settling down and finding out how better to do that. So I think that's where we are right now.
Okay. So when you talk of doing new things and, breaking barriers, so the independent space is just, made to enable you to do these things, take risks, innovate, push boundaries. So when you'll decide, whether as publisher or a bookstore owner, when you look at a manuscript or you look at a list of books or you're engaging with publishers' representatives, in the case of bookstores, what makes you tick one and cross out another? Is it your personal ideology? Or is it driven more by reader demand, by what you see your clients picking up? How does it work out? And this is for both indie press and for indie bookstores. How do you decide? Who would like to start? Shobhna?
I guess for our books, how do we decide on manuscript, right? Yes. Well, for one of the obvious things in our research pre-launch of Queer Ink was that we have no numbers on readers, let alone people who read queer books. So there's absolutely no numbers. So what our venture is actually a risk that no venture capitalist would touch. which is fine because that leaves me to do the work that I want to do. When we look at manuscripts, there's several, I just listed down, there's several very obvious criteria that we don't look at, that we sort of won't accept. And it's something like, meet, greet, and do you have a room, emotionless sex type of scenarios, or stories where where the characters opt for a queer lifestyle because of the failed heteronormative relationship, for example, like Fire. Another one is unsafe sexual practices. That's something we don't want to sort of propagate, or we will edit it heavily if that is part of the scene as well. I mean, if it is very crucial, yes, but as a theme, no. And the other thing is pedophilia and things like that. I mean, inflammatory religious writings and things like that basically quote any religious writing. Although we have published, books, short story. I remember I published a short story of the widow and the mistress of one of the gods who actually meet, fall in love, and have a child. So, and that's taken directly from the religion. But, inflammatory, directly, no, we won't do any of that because I don't think I have the space or the bandwidth to go against what is the current climate. So that's definitely a no. But one of the things that we sort of look at is the sensitivity of the story, which means that I don't look at if the writer is queer or not, or what is their gender, what is their sexuality. What is important in word is how the writer has understood a queer life to write about it, which is very different to an actor, for example. Like the current topic is that a hijra is supposed to act as a hijra, for example. In writing, I find if a straight man writes and they write well, and no red flags come up, I will accept that writing, and which I have published. So in writing, it clearly comes across the intention of the writer, I think, and that is something I would like to nurture because that helps sensitize the mainstream community. So my target is not necessarily the queer community. Yes, the content comes from queer community, but the larger part is actually to sensitize and make sure that the families and friends, colleagues understand the queer word, understand the queer life. So therefore, I don't look at the sexuality or gender of the writer or the reader. I just focus that this word has to go out in a manner that's sensitive to us, that I will be able to read to my child, to myself, or my partner would be able to read and not be offended. Of course, the assessment is done by a panel of people, from all walks of life. So that also reinforces what we do. But the bottom line is that, there's certain guidelines, those 3 or 4 that I said, we don't touch that material at all. Because we want to focus on the positive, basically. Our end focus is to sensitize the mainstream. And when I say mainstream, the concept is, again, not probably applicable for India, but the percentages is like 10% of the population, which is if we look at India, extended family is 10 people. And I take it, okay, 1 in 10 person in a family is on a spectrum somewhere, not an ADHD spectrum, but on a spectrum somewhere of sexuality and gender. And how is that person not able to live their life? Because the 9 others are not aware. So my job is to actually make sure that there is material, free or paid, available for the 9 others, to make sure that this is what they're doing to the family member.
Thank you. Esha? You're on mute.
For us, when I started off, I was just B-books, I was just on my own. So I was mostly doing literary fiction, mostly in translation, like I mentioned. But over the years, I think we changed in a sense that when we had another editor on board, Riddhi Moitro, she has a very deep understanding of mythology. and deep interest in mythology. So then we started a line where we were translating a lot of, like, not fictionalized mythology that sells, but like proper non-fiction mythology that there is, translations of that from Bangla to English. And then we also realized that at some point of time that commercial was also important. I remember my dad came to me and said that the name of the publishing is not Asia Chatterjee Publishing House, it's B-Books. So, I mean, it's not only your personal choices that you will publish. So do that for a separate, if you want to do business, then forget that. You also need to do a line of commercial stuff which will sell. So we do a lot of, now we are doing a lot of copyright-free stuff which sell very well at the book fairs. So that brings in the money. For around 2018, we were invited to the Mami Word to Screen program that they used to conduct. They stopped it to 2020, unfortunately, for COVID. I had a very big exposure to the Bombay film market, Bollywood, basically, and also the South Indian film market, where I realized that there was a big demand for book to screen adaptation. Like, there was a demand for stories, and there was a good demand for the kind of fiction that I was publishing, a little offbeat, especially for the web, the internet-based platforms. So now we are also acquiring stories where we see a few other criterias. Like, I'm not getting into the language and the narrative and all of that. I mean, of course, it has to be unique in either storytelling or the plot or the narrative or the writing. But apart from that, we are also looking at stories where even if we don't see a market of B2C selling, there possibly can be a market for B2B to the school libraries. And now we've also tied up with a number of school libraries and bookstores which deliver to these school libraries. Or there's a market for audio, or there possibly is a market in the international space. Or there's a possibility that it could be adapted into a film because there's a lot of drama in that. So it keeps changing with time. I mean, especially during COVID, we had to change our strategy. We just couldn't depend on B2C anymore, because our main business was coming from the book fairs that we were conducting across India and across West Bengal. And when that stopped, we had to rethink the strategy, and that's what we came up with. And for the last 2 years, that's what made us survive, run the establishment, pay the salaries, and produce the books. Apart from B2C selling, whatever else, copyright sales, basically. So that, and I mean, we're about to publish a book which is called Pakhi Hijrer BA, which we published in Bangla back in 2002. It's basically written by somebody from the queer community. And he basically writes about how he discovered his gender during the teenage and how he joined the community. He ran away from home, the politics of that community, not the queer community, I'm just talking about the transgender community, and how, I mean, that entire dynamics of it, and then how he had to come out of it and like stay away from that transgender community because there's a lot of politics there as well. I mean, I feel like in Bangla or even other, I think, language publishing, a lot of things have been written which are now coming to focus because they are coming in English. I mean, in Bengali, we published in 2002 in Bangla.
Okay, 2002.
And now, because there was a kind of grant that opened up for that, for books only on the LGBTQ genre, we wanted to do this book because it's a very fat book and we don't have the money to pay the translator. So we always wait for opportunities in terms of grants to see. So when that opened up in UK, so we applied for that, got that, and we now have a translator who's
Okay.
So yeah, it keeps changing. But yes, what we don't want to publish, I should mention, is that which is sensitive in a sense that it could create some kind of disturbance in the society, which could promote some kind of violence, which is outrightly political in a sense without a context. If it's violent or if it's charging at somebody, irrespective of which side, right, left, whatever, without a context, with it, like, we wouldn't want to risk that. We wouldn't want to get into that space. So anything that would cause disturbance and kind of any kind of turbulence hurt a certain sentiment, hurt the community sentiment, we say no. However good the story is, either we request the author to kind of make it more subtle, or kind of cut that portion out, or we wouldn't accept those titles.
Okay, thank you. Dibya, you are writing, publishing poetry, and it works. The dynamics are very different from those of prose. So how does it work for you? How do you go for a manuscript, and what is it you're looking for? As a small independent publisher, how are you pushing your boundaries?
First of all, I'm looking for an author who is not famous.
Okay.
That's the first criteria. So, I mean, the famous, the fame comes with a lot of baggage. So it becomes I want to work with the manuscript, not on the person. That I have published some well-known names, but then the first thing was okay, so I cannot give you these, nothing. So why do you want to work with me? But then they said that because you bring out good books. That is one criteria. Second criteria is that point blank, I'm asking that I'm going to change everything about your manuscript. You have to agree with that. I mean, not unreasonably, but you have to give me the the license or the work on the manuscript. So 90% of the books that we publish, the titles are given by me. I mean, I'm proud of that fact. Because how it comes and how it goes out, it's it's completely different. Thankfully, we have a bunch of friends who help me with the editing process. So as far as the manuscript is concerned, I'm not worried about the manuscript, because I believe that I can turn it around. If you allow me to work on your book, we'll sit together, we'll go through line by line, word by word, and we'll figure it out how to make it a best book. But you have to allow me to do that, because there are a lot of writers who are very positive about their words. I appreciate that, but then I won't be able to work with you. And as per the topics, see, for example, recently this whole controversy about Vara Rao's book being published by Penguin Random House. I was thinking about it. If I have gotten a manuscript, I would have published a manuscript, and there would not have been no controversy at all. And that is two different things. One thing is I'm small, so people don't look it up. And second thing, see, I'm aware of, and second thing, I don't have a lawyer to look at all this work. And second thing, at one level, I'm aware of where to, it's not self-censorship as such, but at the same time, I'm aware of where to draw a boundary. Since I'm working in the field of poetry, I understand that there are ways of saying things. It doesn't have to be direct. See, there are the power that they understand a kind of language, but you can always change it. You can always say things that they would not get it. For example, we published this book by Navina Das, Sanskarnama, which is a very direct political poems about what's going on in the world. So there were two words that I asked Navina to cut it from the book. One is the name of who, I'm not mentioning the name. And then another word is the word fuck. I mean, I don't have the problem with the word fuck, but her poems are so political, so in your face, that word was not fitting there. So, and she agreed, thankfully. And now I'm working with a couple of poets from Kashmir. What happened is, I was working with one poet from Kashmir, then he called me up one day and said that Big Brother is watching. And he has a government job. So, and I've been advised that I should not publish any poems on any writing for some time. So that project got shelved. And then another poet from Kashmir sent me the manuscript. And I told him about this issue. And then said, okay, you decide what can go, what cannot go. So now I'm sitting with this and deciding, looking at every word and line. I don't want to muffle the voice, but I want to find a different way of saying, because what he is trying to say, the poet, is important. So we'll find a way to say what we want to say or what he wants to say, and then figure it out. And there is a power in being small. because I don't have to worry about the budget, money, and if somebody comes to read or something, I just put my hands up, okay, do whatever. I have nothing. So I mean, that's itself is powerful. Again, the whole idea that people keep saying poetry doesn't sell. I think I take it positively. It allows me to do kind of books that I want to do, because I don't have to worry about whether it will sell or not, whether I will get my return or not. So I will print limited number of copies, and I'm sure that I'll sell those. After that, we'll see.
Okay, so Vishal and Radhika, how do you all look at this issue, of what you can sell, what you cannot sell, what's lying on your shelves? And, people, are you able to push the kind of books that you believe in? I know that in Pagdandi, you have a lot of titles that may not be easily available at the larger stores. So are you able to push the books that you really believe in, or how do you balance this, between what sells and what you would want to sell? You handhold your readers, like Radhika mentioned earlier. How do you go about this? How do you choose your books?
This for me, Sucharita.
Both of you and Radhika, you can go now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, see, definitely, I think we will not have a book in the store that we personally wouldn't like to read. It might not be, I mean, there's so many books, one could never read them all, but one can hope to. And we would never keep a book in the store that we personally wouldn't want to read at some point. So that's kind of our criteria for selecting which books should be there in the store. If we are ticking off a list, would we want to read it? So yes, I mean, that's the benefit of running a bookstore, that you can read your own books. And with regards to, keeping books which might not be, I mean, I really love what Divyajyoti said, that, being small gives us that luxury, if I were to put it in that way, that, we can choose to be and choose to keep what we want to keep, and not, have those pressures of investors, or I don't know who all are other people who would be putting pressures. I know a lot of chain bookstores who get pressured by celebrities to keep certain number of copies of their books in their stores, and have to compulsorily, do some kind of an event to promote it. And I think being independent, being small, allows us to say no when we want to, which we pretty much have to do very frequently, and say yes to the ones which we want to say yes to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Radhika?
At this question of curation versus censoring versus, picking books for our readers, it's a very interesting question for me. It's something I've been mulling over for the last 3-4 years since I've started this journey. And I first started it having ideas of, there are these different categories that I feel are underrepresented. There are certain authors that are underrepresented. I want to make sure that Champaca has them. But of course, everybody comes with their own agenda. Not necessarily political, but everybody has their own agenda. And when I approached it, of course, there were certain subjects and topics that I was more interested in, and that, of course, reflects in Champaca. And similarly, now we have other people like this Tejasvi, who reads very widely, and his ideas of what Champaca's curation should be has really enriched what Champaca is as of today. Similarly, with our readers, there are so many times when a lot of our readers have come and said, "Oh my God, you have this book. Why don't you check this book also? You're going to love it." And I did. I've loved the recommendations that we've got from our readers as well. So we focused a lot on translations, we try to have books by more than 40% women authors. We have a queer shelf, which many people have come and said, it's so nice that you're displaying them like this, because we've not seen them in other stores. We have books about caste, we have books about all of these subjects that, of course, we had an interest in when we started curating, but also saw it reflected in our readers. And we are nothing without our readers. If people showed no interest in our books because we were curating them for ourselves, then we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So it was wonderful to see this interest reflected in people coming in to Champaca and them enriching our collection. And we're still, like both of them mentioned, we're very small and we love being small. Like we did one, we do our own in-store events about books that are relevant now, but are not talked about more recently. Like we started with one book on Hannah Arendt. And we're like, oh no, will people, what will people say? We're talking about totalitarianism in a very academic context, but nobody cares, and it's wonderful. We had a house full, but we're so small that nobody else cares beyond us. We still have some wonderful conversations and wonderful books, and it's that part of that journey has been very rewarding.
So are you all able to, as as bookshop owners in this small independent space, are you all able to nudge readers equally towards books you think that they could pick up? What is the reader's response like?
For us, the reader's response has been very good, and it's as much a learning experience for us as we are nudging them. Like when I've approached the bookstore, and my colleagues and people who help us also have approached the bookstore. We've all approached it as readers ourselves. Mm-hmm. So it is a constant learning experience for us. It's a constant growth for us. There are genres that we recommend to even each other that we have not read before, but it's really helping us think more and better. Yeah.
So staying in Pune, I buy all my books from Padran. No, I rarely buy on Amazon now. And if I don't have something, if I don't see something there, I tell Vishal or Neha to get it for me, and they do that. And I've learned a lot, about books in my conversation with Neha. She's usually there when I go in, and she's wonderful. She knows most of the books that there are, in Padandi, and this is so refreshing. So, and in fact, that is partially the inspiration for thinking of this roundtable, this inaugural session. So I wanted to know from you also, Vishal, how many readers have you been able to nudge towards, books from small presses? People, and as a writer, if I tell somebody I was published, they immediately ask me for all the, the names of all the major publishers, or Penguin, or Rupa, and they cannot think of other publishers beyond these. So have you been able to, alert or make aware your readers to small publishers? Vishal?
Yeah, definitely. I think it works both ways. And I love what Radhika said about readers recommending books to us as well, where they would come in and they would, tell us about something that they had read, which might be from a small imprint. Or authors like you yourself, like we got to know about Dholi books because of you. And then, we built that relationship and, got those books. So I think, yeah, like, readers making us aware of the whole wide world out there of those small indie publishers, which we also want to champion. And with the readers, like I said, like us recommending them, that act of recommending, and then while recommending, how we select the book to recommend, that nudges them towards discovering those small indie presses.
Okay. So this, for publishers, this idea of getting a book noticed, whether through distribution, sending it for awards, asking for reviews, which is really taxing. I know that I was published by Dholi Books and Indie Press, and I know that it gets very difficult to send multiple copies out for reviews, and also all these awards, engaging with readers, all of these, they are cost incurring. So does that become a deterrent for the small presses? And a second question associated with that, is this why we don't see too many independent publishers making it award lists or even the short lists? Why aren't we seeing too many indie publishers on short lists? This is for the publishers here. Esha, Shobhna.
I'll start. Before I get into that question, I wanted to ask Radhika, coming to the earlier question. Recently, you asked us for some copies, especially Hoshang's book. So was it recommended by readers, or how it happened? Because I was a little surprised to get that mail.
So I don't actually, we've been keeping other Hoshang's books, even from Writers Workshop and things for a long time. And I didn't know that because I'm actually personally not very active on social media. So I didn't know that y'all had done a book from Hoshang. So one of my readers told me that, oh, have you seen this one? And then of course I said, oh no, I haven't, and I immediately ordered it. So
Okay, no,
yeah.
Nice to hear from you about that book.
Yeah.
No, I mean, to answer this question, no, I mean, see, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm in Delhi, and I know the people in publishing who are in, like, inside, not the famous people, some famous people also, but like other people. And I have been to some parties, and I have heard like in the stories inside and how much work it happens, the networking, the other things for an award, including Site Academy Awards. So it has sort of like, I mean, the point where I am standing right now, I like, okay, this is something that like, doesn't suit my temperament. One, second thing, I cannot do that. That's too much of effort. Can I give an example? Okay, this is public, right? Sorry, but I'm saying it. I can probably request you to delete it. I have a friend who is a good friend. He wants to win Sahitya Akademi Yuva Puraskar. This is his last year. He deserves to win. And he is not getting his, like, I want to publish him, but like he doesn't want to publish with me. He wants to publish with a big publisher, mainstream publisher. And he thinks that winning the Sahitya Akademi Yuva Puraskar will give him the chance to nab a big publisher. But he should win, but I have a feeling that he would not, but because he is not networking with those people, the right place. So I'm not saying this is bad thing or good thing, but this is as it is. It happens to everything. Like, it's a name that counts. Again, like, the sellability. I started as a writer, a prose writer. Then I tried to publish my book with a publisher. Then like my friends told me that no, they won't publish you. Why? Because you cannot sell. Not your writing. A mainstream publisher cannot sell you. You have never been to abroad. You are not like, famous for anything else. You don't say like, interesting stuff on social media. You are nowhere in the party circle. So people don't know you. How you will sell? It's a visibility thing. So, I mean, like, it's nice to have an award. So recently, like, people keep sending me, at least 5 people send me this link about the British Library organized something about translator fellowship recently. So 5 people sent me the link. Then why don't you apply? I said, like, no, I mean, they won't select me. They will select somebody who has more visibility, more name. And no, I mean, it's not bitterness. Please mind, it's not bitterness. Like, I know where I stand right now. Probably later on, but I'm happy with my space.
We're running out of time. Shobhna, how has it been for you? Is it very difficult to get, especially because you're in a niche area and writing niche books? How difficult is it to get reviews and the rest of the scene out there?
Okay, it's not very difficult to get newspaper articles because the subject is such that it is queer and it always has some space somewhere that somebody wants to write, whether it's on the internet or in the newspaper. The difficulty is, again, like Divyajyoti said, it's about the effort one has to put into awards. Now, when we go to awards, the first thing is the queer word. Now, when I started in 2010, when I used to talk to distributors, bookstores, anybody, when I used to say it's LGBT books, queer, about Indian lives, nahi, wo to kaun hai? And that statement still holds true. And no matter how much, so that's why I don't generally, if the writers themselves want to put the books up for awards, they're welcome to do it. But my mandate is that I need to publish enough, create enough content so it reaches the reader. So I must nurture the reader and the storyteller to connect. So that's where I spend my energies on, basically. rather than chasing, glory or anything of that sort. Because that, yes, it gives publicity, but the publicity of the word of mouth, I think, and is much more credible, I find, and it reaches far and wide than anything would. And also the sense of, we are looking at emerging writers and giving that person a chance so they can, use us as stepping stones to something bigger and larger. It's a satisfaction itself, which is great. So we sort of just focus as independent press on where our niche is, who are our niche customers, who are our niche readers, and the storytellers, queer storytellers in India, or people who tell queer stories in India, is where we niche, and that's where we focus on, and that works for us. I think that's the happiness factor comes from that, and we're happy with all that. Our ecosystem is actually happy with that.
I think I agree with you 100% there. I saw that with my book also. I'm very, very bad at networking. I won't go out and tell people, okay, I've written this book, please review it, or buy it. I don't do that. And the early books also, as a small indie press, they did not have the bandwidth to push my book so much. So word of mouth, and I did get reviews, but whatever came from word of mouth. I could not push beyond that, neither could my publishers. So I do know either side how it works. But Esha, you publish a larger variety of books. How has it been for you?
So
book grow.
I think, I think compared to the Bangla market, I mean, the Indian language market is tiring at times when it comes to getting the reviews out. I mean, because it's just so widely distributed. There's somebody in Delhi, somebody in Bombay, it's a great thing, but then you have to send it out across. So see, we have luckily formed a very good community of book reviewers. We never did paid reviews. We will never do paid reviews. We have only 5 books that we can send out to reviewers, and we put out a giveaway post, or we put out a post where we are looking for those reviewers. Reviewers write to us. Our only criteria is whatever you post, good or bad, please post it, because we've put in money to publish this book, and then post a review so that it gets a certain visibility. Most of our books have been promoted by the bookstagrammers that they call themselves. I mean, there's a beautiful community of bookstagrammers. There's also a lot of Facebook pages where books are posted by these bookstagrammers. That's the main, I would say, how we get books out. I mean, in terms of launches and everything. We also send it out to critiques and reviewers only when they want it. Scroll does it for us, excerpts. A lot of times, Shoma Ghoshal, now I think she's based in Bangalore, he's done something for Champaca also. Because he's Bengali, he would look up something that we published or on our page and write to me and say that I want to do this. We recently had somebody from GQ who wrote to us and said that I want to review it. That way we send it out. But I can't send out 20 copies of the books randomly to all the people on my list for every book that we publish. That's not possible. When it comes to awards, I've realized that the Indian awards is also a business. And I have proof of that, because there's this very big award which gives prizes for book covers. And one of our book covers, the book was called Moom. It was such a striking cover. There was never a concept of a first runner-up. But for only that year, they gave us a first runner-up and gave the award to a penguin book cover, and wrote a mail personally to us saying that, it was very close, something like that. So, I mean, and to be honest, somebody in the jury told me that, they wouldn't risk giving it to an independent publisher because they also want to get a certain visibility from the award, which a penguin or a harper could bring in. So we send it to all the awards that we know. That's something that we want, because it's our responsibility as a publisher to push the book as much as possible from our end. We do that. We recently had a book called The Anger of Saintly Men, which did very well, even in terms of sale, because the writer is very popular on social media. She does a lot of promotions and everything, and she's a fantastic writer. But then again, nobody was wanting to take the risk of shortlisting a book like this, because it could harm the sentiments. It was not harming any sentiments, but because the entire North, it could hurt the sentiments. I mean, I have no grudges against anything else but these awards, which fake it by saying that, we want to promote new writers and independent presses. Nobody's doing anything. Only thing that, I love the independent bookstores. They do help us a lot, especially in the East, because I reside in the East and it's easier for me to do business this side. But otherwise, critiques also, like I said, if you know personally somebody, you send it out, it works out. Otherwise, sending out cold mails and awards hasn't worked out for us yet.
Right.
I think that's a shared sentiment across the board. Okay. So I'll have...
Nobody in India. It's only once something like this happens, like a man booker is Gitanjali, she gets the man booker is when Penguin is taking up all the credits. Penguin did nothing for Gitanjali. It was only Deborah and Tilted Axis, and Daisy Rockwell acquired the book, published, got it translated. Deborah, Tilted Axis published it, and Penguin is their distributor in India. So they got the book distributed, but they were doing nothing till it was shortlisted, nothing. So now they are cutting cakes and all of that. I mean, kuch bhi.
I agree.
I have friends there and I know it's going to be broadcasted, but I don't think people would listen much.
No, but you're right. You're right. What you're saying is correct.
So how is the gender issue with all of you? I mean, I can imagine the gender, the religious issues, the ideological issues, all of this that you could face. What has your experience been? Are there pressures that you all face on a daily basis? In the case of bookstores, people walking in and commenting on the ideology of certain titles. I've heard about that. Or, books that could be published or not published, or, readers wanting books written by male authors, or awards going to male authors. All of these, how do you all deal with these, Shobhna?
The thing is, as I said, the few things that I don't publish, it's been upfront since day one. So people, accept that when they write. If it doesn't fit that, they don't. Well, in terms of ideology, we're welcome to anything. I think if it is to a point where I have a niggling thought about it, I would, and the another person in the panel would have a very similar thought. Then we would give it to a lawyer to read. But so far, only one book has gone to the lawyer. The others, no. We accept any ideology. And the thing about being queer is about, accepting the I don't want to sound negative, but it's accepting what's out there, right? Anything is out there. India is yet to be explored. We don't know. So I don't want to be the gateway of voices. We have to explore the population. We have to explore all the numbers to figure out what is the queer theory in India. What are the people in India? What is the norm of queer people in India? We don't have any numbers, no censorship, no census data, no readership data. So I think we must encourage anything and everything, except, religion, for example, is one thing I'm very particular about, because I really don't want to get into the debate. That's one thing I can't debate. So therefore, I will not publish that. I will not even look at that. If I was a scholar of religion, I probably could debate it, would do it. But that's one thing I can't defend. So therefore, that is the only thing that I will not accept. And of course, there's pedophilia. Those type of ideology, it's actually not an ideology, it's a behavior. So those are no-nos, but any ideology, because we really need to find out more about queer people in India. We need more information, more books, more stories. So anything goes for us.
Okay. Radhika and Vishal, do you all face this issue of, readers walking in and commenting on the titles and questioning the ideology of some titles that you have, or having an argument over it? Have you all faced that?
Yeah, because we have a cafe attached as well, which is in the same small premises of the shop. We have almost 100 people walking in every day. and all of them look at the books that we have on display. And definitely, very frequently, some of them will point out a book and say, why are you keeping this? This is nonsense. So very honestly, I'm prepared. I'm prepared that I'm going to have a stone thrown through my glass window. I'm expecting that. I hope it never happens. But if it were to happen, I wouldn't be surprised that I've had those kind of people come in and talk to us about that. But I think, it's what, I mean, if one were to cater to the, commercial interests of the kind of books that should be kept, we wouldn't have been running a bookstore in that case. I mean, we run it because those are the kind of books we want to keep. And and they kind of reflect our personal values as well. And I think the readers also, connect with us for that, and they give us a response for that, and appreciate our efforts into, keeping those books. I sometimes, looking at the current climate, I get very disheartened, thinking about, okay, what is it one can do to, improve the situation? And then just the fact that, okay, I'm at least able to sell some books which might, show a different point of view to some people, that gives me a lot of, succor, that, okay, I mean, at least there's some contribution we are doing
Absolutely.
in today's times.
Radhika, what's your experience on that front?
I think it's very interesting. I think of it this way. We have, say, I'm looking at 600,000 titles in 1 month. I'm only able to keep, say, 5,000 to 8,000 titles at max. Now, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that out of these titles that I'm choosing, at least 50% are women, that the queer population is represented, that all the other populations, all languages, there's just so much that needs to be represented in such a small number from so much that has been published. So that's one of the ways that we look at how we keep gender or a lot of these other issues that we want to keep in store. Second dimension for us, which is very interesting, is that all our staff are women also. We are all women. And we do get very interesting comments from online, on in store, when we go for pop-ups, all of these things. And that is not any different from any woman in any space in India. I don't think the book selling space or publishing space is different in that way. It is what one would expect. So yes, we get comments on the titles, we get comments on our selection, but like the Vishal said, we, in some ways, we do it knowingly, because we want to do this. That's what we do.
So a slightly sticky question for publishers. Writers wanting advances over royalties, how do you deal with that? Does it deter you from getting the writers you want at times?
So, I mean, I think Dibujiti already mentioned this, that we look for writers who are not famous. So the thing is that my internet is a bit dodgy, like I said. So we mostly try and look for, we are mostly publishing authors. So we are mostly publishing authors who are first-time authors, or somebody, who's not had a great experience with a bigger publishing press. So, the advances come in if they are represented mostly by a literary agent. So we try and not to acquire authors who have literary agents, because it becomes a bit difficult. Very seldom we have only 2 authors who have a literary agent. And I know Kanishk personally, so that's one thing. But otherwise, you're mostly trying to publish authors who are not represented. And we are very open about it, that it's very difficult to give advances. So there's no question of that, at least till now. So yeah, that would be a deterrent if my focus would have been to publish the very, very, very big names. but no, nothing like that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shobhna?
Am I audible?
Yes. So I think what we focus is on the story, actually, what the story tells us and how we would, how it sort of ingests with the panel, basically. And at the end of the day, I'm the one who's signing the legal document. So I have to weigh a lot of things. But mostly it's got to do with how the story is written and what it represents. Does it represent queer India to its fullest in the context that it's written? That's my mandate, as I said, and that is the only thing I will publish. I have published big authors. I've published Ruth, Raj Rao, Ho Sheng, Niladri. I mean, all the bigger published writers in queer books. But my focus is on basically on what the story being told, because I think that's much more important. And generally, people agree if there is a need for advance. Generally, we at a blanket say we don't have advance. We'll give you a bigger royalty share, or we're still trying to figure out a win-win situation for the writer and the publisher. So the split could be 60-40, 50-50, depending on what is available at what time and what type of contract is being made. So it's higher, on the higher side sometimes, but no royalties at all. It depends, because we end up doing a lot of work with the editors to make the storytelling available for international readership. We're not only making it for Indian readership. So international readership requires a different level of editing and different presentation of book as well. So there's usually, what I do is I have books formatted for the Indian market and books formatted for the non-Indian market. So all this take a lot of effort, and we're open about those things. But at the end of the day, it's a story that's being told.
Thank you. We are, I think, at the fag end of the session. Just one, a very standard question for all of you. Where do you see the indie space going? Let's say over the next decade, both for selling of books as well as for publishing. What is your vision for it, and what do you think could happen? Is it going to open up? Are we going to have awards for indie publishers specifically? Is that something to hope for? Where do you see it all going?
I think it's happening. Yeah, I think it's happening. Like, things are looking up. One example is this session, for example, and then there is an awareness happening. Like, still, when you talk to the reader in public, Penguin is still the name. But people are still now learning about a new publisher. I mean, like, for example, Panther's Paw that Yogesh Mitra is doing. He's doing fantastic work. And I see, 5 years, 10 years down the line, it's becoming something. And, that is one example I look up to. And then there are other publishers that have been, Howpal has been very good in terms of, business side of it. I mean, I really appreciate. I look at them and they're the way they are doing it. So there is another model out there. Yogesh is another model out there. So there are people who are experimenting the field, and then I think it will change. Unless the capitalists learn this and pick it up, the lessons, and co-opt it for themselves. That is the danger of capitalism. Then what happens is you start doing well as an independent press, then some big press comes and buy you out. I would like that. If they give me some. I'm sorry.
Asha, would you like to come in?
So, I think, my vision is a bit different from, I don't like being exclusive. I don't like the fact that people would only call me an all women session and only remember me on Women's Day kind of a situation. So I don't want that there are awards only for independent publishing, because the moment that happens, then the the award scene is gone. Like, we won't have, they would not even consider our books to be, in the main ceremony. So that's something that I don't want. What I want is that there are grant programs. I'm not expecting support from the government, but there are so many organizations, bigger organizations, arts organizations like Tata Trust and Reliance. And, these people have a lot of money. So I'm hoping that at some point of time, some organization will come up with a good model of funding, which is there in the West. The reason why the independent scene flourished is because they were not thinking about, they did not have to think about where the money will come from. They could publish 20, 25 books a year without thinking how many copies would sell. So the focus was just on the books. I agree that at some point of time, people will buy out some independent presses if they're doing well, but why not? I mean, even that's great. If they do, that's a welcome change. So I feel like unless a monetary support comes in without any kind of take back, no, I'm not talking about venture capitalists, then you have to give the returns back to them, but a kind of grant program to support publishers and writers and translators. What we get from the West, I see that it's difficult to the kind of the flourishing that has happened there in the West. I don't see that happening in India if there isn't a financial support. If there is, then there's a lot of potential, and it's just waiting to kind of get the right, ambience. What happened to what OTT brought into the independent storytellers and directors and writers, whatever. Something like that is awaiting to happen even in this independent publishing press. I'm very positive about it.
So on that note of hope, we'll wrap up for today. Thank you very much, each one of you, for finding the time to come and attend and give all your responses. Thank you very much. And
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.